Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to the IDLance Transition Teachers Roundtable. We are so excited for you all to be here. We were going to sing a cappella, but because I have such a beautiful singing voice, I was actually voted out of it. But we'd like to welcome you all to the first annual Transition Teachers Roundtable. We have an awesome and exciting group of instructional designers and IDLancers here from IDLance. And to get things started, I want to kick it off to my good friend, Allie York, who's going to go with introductions.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Allie York. I am the Director of Learning Design and Development at IDLance. I am also a business owner and freelancer myself, and I was once a teacher. Hence, I am here co-leading this panel. And so today, what I would first like to do is invite everyone to introduce themselves. And so we're going to go last name alphabetical. So that means we're going to start with Catherine, and she can introduce herself. So as you all introduce yourself, give your name, how long you've been an ID, maybe a subject that you taught, anything else that you want to share in about 20-30 seconds or so. So Catherine, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Allie. I'm Catherine Beall. I was a teacher for 19 years and a head of school of a small private Montessori school. I taught first, second, and third grade as well. And I've been doing freelance ID full-time for a year, but part-time for a year prior to that. And that's me.
Awesome, thank you. And next we have Alex Mitz. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Wow, that alphabetical jumped real fast. My name's Alex Mitz. I was a former 7th grade English language arts teacher. And I was a teacher. I did a couple of things in there too. I was also an instructional technology coach, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, I was in the educational system for 6 years and yeah, bounced over to ID. And so now I do a little bit of everything. I do a little bit of ID, a little bit of e-learning development, a bit of web development, and a lot of voiceover as well, which is why I'm in this box. But yeah, lots of things. But ID and e-learning pay most of the bills, so I'm here.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for joining us from your box. And Kim Scott, you're up next.
So I started out as a middle and high school history and social studies teacher. I did that for about 8 years. And then I moved into the L&D world. I started off doing ed tech for my school district. Did that in higher ed for a little while and then moved into the corporate world. So I've been doing L&D for about a little over 10 years, maybe about 11 years. And my freelance business kind of started itself 3 years ago, and it's just taken off ever since. I mainly focus on instructional design, LMS administration, and learning strategies and solutions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. And Starla.
All right. I have probably the least traditional route of everyone, but I was a teacher for many years as a special education teacher. So I worked with teenagers, and then I got the chance to move to Indonesia 7 years ago. And I was lucky enough, because I have a pre-med background, to teach middle school science there. So I've done a lot of different teaching, a lot of different subjects and different things. But I transitioned to instructional design 3.5 years ago now. And I've been doing freelance since then because I lived in Indonesia and that was the only option. But it's actually blossomed to this really big, great business that I have running now, and it's going all right. So I love learning development, and I'm getting into the UI UX space a little bit, so it's very interesting.
Lots of awesome backgrounds and experiences among all of us. That is really, really cool that we have a wide variety of y'all here today. So, hey, thanks so much for introducing yourselves. Let's go ahead and move it back to Craig so he can talk a little bit about the intention of the panel and kind of, why we're here today.
Thanks, Allie. So one of the things that I think makes IDLance really cool is not only are we a agency that can work with clients and do some really cool learning projects, but we have also a community, and it's a community made of former teachers just like this. I know myself being a transition teacher, I've been in an ID for 4 years, and IDLance was huge. Sitting with Parker, sitting with Andrea. I think Starla and I talked a while back about doing some storyline courses. That was a while ago, but I remember that because we look at this journey. As teachers, we're so learner focused, and what I want to do is I want to kind of kick this off and really, before we go to Allie for that first question, is to think about, as teachers, we are very learner focused. We get all of these different folks in here. And I think that gives us a different eye and a unique eye when it comes to being an instructional designer. So today, I hope we share some tips, some tricks, but more importantly, I hope that we just share in this community, because I think this is what makes IDLance so special, is we're able to come together and really kind of make it there. So if you're not part of the community, join us. And if not, stick around for a great conversation. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Allie for the first question.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, keeping all these things in mind, right? Okay. So, all right. So here's how it's going to work. Here's the sitch. So there are 4 questions that we've chosen from the list that we provided to you, but don't worry if your question wasn't chosen. At the very end, we have a little bit of time to have you share anything that you all want to share. So first I'll ask a question, and then Craig, and then me, and then Craig, and then we'll kind of close with anything else that you want to, impart your experience. So when we ask these questions, we invite, any of you wonderful panelists to jump in, and then Craig and I may jump in to help, ask clarifying questions, or, use jumping off points, things like that, or maybe, dare I say, share little tidbits of things that we've experienced ourselves too. So how are we feeling? We see some smiles. It's all good. All right. So the first question that I have for you all today is, what was your process for preparing to transition and leave teaching? And as you think about that question, I have some kind of follow-up points on that, right? So maybe for some of you, it wasn't necessarily directly leaving teaching. It was, maybe you did instructional design along with it, or however that looks to you. But think about if you made that, I guess no matter how you made that transition, right? Like, what did that timeline look like? What additional education did you get? How did you go about getting gigs? Did you volunteer? How did you go about building your portfolio? What platforms did you put it on? Kim, I think you have a really interesting answer for that, perhaps. And then also, how did you get support through that process? So that's a lot, but in short, what was your process like for transitioning to instructional design? And go.
I'll start. I think I had first heard of instructional design. A friend of mine mentioned she did it, and I was like, what is that? And I started looking into it a little bit more, and I don't know if it was as big in 2020, as definitely not as much as it is now. At least in Facebook groups and Instagram, or sorry, not Instagram, LinkedIn. Sorry, my dog's barking. But I couldn't find a whole lot, and I did find a school that, and I'm not a really good self-learner because I need the direction, right? I need someone to be like, let's learn this, you need to know this. So I felt for my learning style that it was best to join one of these schools, and that was my path, and they kind of helped me along with learning and doing things like building my portfolio, networking, getting my LinkedIn up, because I didn't even have a LinkedIn at the time. Like, I was never on LinkedIn. So I think that was similar to you, Kim, right? I think we joined the same place. I don't know if we can say it, but I came from IDLE.
Nice. So you decided to do a more formal-ish education route, someone
Yep.
to guide you through that process. So going through that program was like a
Yeah.
mentorship plus an education upskilling experience for you.
Exactly. And I've seen a lot of people be really successful doing it on their own. That wasn't for me. And there weren't a lot of mentors around that I could find access to help tell me what things I needed to learn or where I should focus. So now I think there's so many resources on LinkedIn. You definitely could do it on your own. I know IDLance is a great program, especially for freelancers. So I think there's a lot of resources now to be able to do it on your own.
Absolutely. Thanks, Starla.
Yeah.
Who else wants to jump in? Yeah,
I
Kat.
can jump in next because mine is drastically different. So we may have just known each other from I'm sorry, LinkedIn, but I was never an idol. I actually transitioned about, like I said, about 11 years ago. So it's 2013. LinkedIn is a thing. I'm on there, but like Starla, I'm not active. There are LinkedIn influencers. There's no ID people posting every day. There's none of that. There's no people telling you how to beat the algorithm. There are no boot camps. There are no academies. There is not a lot out there. There are some colleges that have instructional design masters and degrees, but most of them at the time are in person or blended, but you're limited kind of to your geographical area. And here in Memphis, Tennessee, your option was University of Memphis or none. That was it. It just wasn't a lot out there. I actually transitioned first into educational technology, and that's a combination between a teacher and an IT person. So I train teachers on how to use technology. The way I kind of transitioned is, and I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I see a lot of teachers that think, oh, instructional design is just like teaching and I can move into it. And I always tell them it's not just like it. There's similarities. And one of the things that I didn't realize I was doing, was within my teaching job, I was embedding other things that ended up helping me move into ed tech. So for instance, there were faculty meetings and, we had a great PLC coach and they had a challenge about who can, show other teachers a good teaching strategy. So I was somebody who would get up and compete in that challenge. I taught social studies. I, got to know the social studies curriculum directors for our districts. And so when they needed to plan conferences, I was one of the teachers they consulted. I helped them plan conferences. I actually delivered professional development at those conferences. So those types of things were kind of embedded within my teaching career that helped me move out of the classroom. Because when I did, I had a lot of people saying, well, how'd you get that job at the school board? Or how did you get a chance to do this? I started speaking at conferences. I started speaking at district level. I started sharing resources. I had a very early blog called Ingenious Teaching. I think it may even still be around, but it was just, I had very creative teaching strategies that either I found, I came up with, I modified, and I started sharing them with teachers because social studies is unlike stepchild. So we had to develop a lot of our own, materials. From there, I did ed tech for the district. Then I moved into higher ed, and then I moved into corporate America. So I kind of had a gradual move, and with each move, I made sure within my current job, I was embedding things that I was looking to do. So for instance, when I was in higher ed, I wanted to get into more of the e-learning. I was delivering a lot of in-person learning, but I started trying to develop e-learning courses and get them used to me training them on Zoom, especially like the adjuncts who couldn't always come in for professional development. So slowly, surely embedding those job responsibilities into what I was currently doing. So when I actually applied for a job that wasn't what I currently had or may have been a different, it's like, oh, she already does the newsletter. Oh, she already does instructor-led training. Oh, she already does develop her own materials. She can handle this. So that's kind of doing it with no support, no boot camp, just getting out there and saying, look, I can do this and here's some evidence.
I can go next. It's really fun to hear how different everybody's journey is, and mine's totally different too. So in 2019, it was like my 15th year of teaching, and I was pretty much getting to the point where I was like, yeah, it's maybe getting to be that time. And then COVID. So of course that changed everything, and I really felt with both of my roles, especially as an administrator, that I needed to stick around through that. So it wasn't until March of 2022, it was actually over spring break, that I saw a Facebook ad that was advertising something about instructional design. Never heard of it, looked it up, and fell in love. My bachelor's degree is actually in IT, so it's kind of the perfect blend with technology. My master's is in education. So I spent that entire summer of 2022 upskilling. I took as many courses as I could. Udemy always has a sale. I found IDLance, which was huge, wonderful. I watched every video I could get my hands on to learn more about adult learning theory and all things ID. And then at the end of that summer, I had a very fateful little LinkedIn chat with Miss Allie York, who really kind of stepped in, was my amazing mentor, gave me my first gig. So from there, that last school year, I worked full time while I worked to transition both of my roles to two people that were ready to step into them. The timing was perfect. And I worked very part-time, nights and weekends, while I continued to upskill, build my portfolio. And I've been full-time since I retired as a teacher in May of 2023. So that's me.
Can I
Excellent.
add something really quick before you go, Alex? Sorry to interrupt.
Fine.
Catherine brought up such a good point that was integral to me also transitioning is networking and finding one person who will give you that first opportunity. And I think that is so important to kind of cross that hurdle, because once you have that first opportunity, then I do think you have a little bit more credibility in the corporate world.
Oh
For sure.
yeah.
100%.
You gotta show that you can walk the walk, but somebody's gotta let you take that first step for sure.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
I like how everyone's story is different, except mine, which is almost identical to Kim's story. It was super wild. Like, I got into teaching right at the time when like education and devices started becoming ubiquitous. Like I remember they rolled the cart full of Chromebooks into my classroom, and it's like, cool, what do you want me to do with these? And they're like, oh, huh? And that was about the extent of any sort of direction or training we were having for that. But like I was a sort of a Ferris Bueller story. You ask for a car, you get a computer. And so like I was already like sort of tech savvy at that point. So it was like, in the land of the blind, I was the person with one eye, like I knew technology a little bit better than most of my, educator peers. And so that quickly led to things like in-service trainings for my colleagues. Like, hey, Alex put together this training on how to use, Chromebooks to teach XYZ. Cool. Then that led to, doing it for the district. Like, hey, not just for your site, but let's take you out of the classroom and put you in a role that you can do this for the whole district. Okay, sure. 10% pay bump, I'll take that. Why not? All the while too, because I started getting like a hunger for it as I got more and more. So like that's when I went back to get my master's in educational technology, because it's like I like this job, but I need to cement my place in this job. So I'm going to go get that piece of paper that says like, hey, I'm qualified to do this, and not just you're pretty good at this stuff until the next person who paid all this money is going to, take over your role. And then from there, that led to conferences, like big conferences. The Q conference in Palm Springs, California. I was a speaker there in the Google room for a couple of years in a row, and that was really cool. And then at some point, I went back to the classroom, because the district that I, was at kind of started doing some shady stuff, and I could see it at the district level. Like I was not an administrator, I was not a teacher in the classroom anymore, so I was in this like weird middle ground, and I could see some things going on. I'm like, I don't love this. I'm gonna go figure something else out. So I went back to the classroom for a year, and I was doing all the things I was talking about. I was practicing what I was preaching, and I felt like a super teacher with the technology things that I had learned about and told others to do. And then my district got hit with a ransomware attack, and then like all the devices went down. And so then we were back to like dry erase boards and blah 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 after all this push and all this investment for digital curriculum. And the thing that really started souring me a bit was like, the administrators who had been there for so long were like, oh, this is how, this is how we used to do it. Oh, this is great. This is just like the old days. And it's like, that's not the point here. And so then I was like, you know what, I can't do, if this is always going to be the mentality that, we're, ooh, technology, I don't know. And there's so many, anyway, I was like, you know what, I got to figure something else out. And so then shout out to Matt Sestata, because he had an article floating around about what do teachers do when they're, done. And that's what opened my eyes to instructional design. And it was like, oh, I do this already. I do this already. I do all of these things already, either in the classroom or in that other role. Like Kim said, you sort of start implementing things along the way because you have to, or because it makes sense for what you're doing. It's like, this is what I want. It's like, well, how do I get there? Build a portfolio, get a degree. If you're going the degree route, get the degree. Regardless, do the portfolio. And so I was just addicted to doing this. And it's like, all right, doing this, having interviews on the phone, like, hi, I'm a transitioning teacher. This is 2019 at this point. 2020 rolls around. And as we all know, 2020 happened. And then the local college called and went, hey, do you remember that job you applied for 8 months ago? I do. You still want it? I do. So I did. I told my principal I'm leaving. He's like, yeah, I understand, left, because it was one instructional designer in the corporate space. And then 2020 happened. They're like, oh, we have like 800 faculty members who have never taught online before. We should probably hire a second person. So they hired me. And the rest is history. And, higher ed instructional design is great. It was the first time I had downtime. I sort of had to move away from this minute-to-minute emotional exhaustion of classroom teaching and then into, a less, I don't know, in the moment space. Like, it's weird to get out of teaching and, have people tell me, you can not answer that email right away, right? Like you can hold off for like 5 more minutes. It's like, okay, sure. But yeah, I used that time. Like I was moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour still mentally, but the workflow was like a normal person's workflow. So I used that extra sort of bandwidth I had to start developing portfolio pieces, not just taking stuff I had done in the real world, but sort of even doing like mock things, like mock projects to be like, look, I can do this as well. And then the rest just kind of builds from there. You just keep building and building and building. And that was my story.
I like what you're saying about building, and like one of those commonalities that I'm hearing is we need that champion. One of my favorite TED Talks that I have used is Rita Pearson. She talks about every kid needs a champion. And I feel like as transitioning teachers, we have a different road to lead. We do teaching, but it's not instructional design. I don't know how many times I've heard that. Well, it's not the same. It's different. Education is this, some was that, but we needed a champion. For Catherine, I want to kick this to the group. I want to kick it to Catherine first. I'm going to give a shout out to Allie because she's my partner in crime here. We call it the dream team here at IDLance when we're working together. We work together as a project. We work very closely together. We all have that one champion, and what I would love to hear, like, just give a minute shout out. I'm gonna start with Catherine and kind of work around the room. Who was that champion that gave you either the confidence, or more importantly, gave you the skills or that gig that's now snowballed and in there? So I'm not putting you on the spot there, but you sort of did it yourself there, Catherine. So I'm gonna.
You already know my
answer.
You already know my answer.
I know your answer, but I want to hear how exactly. Not only who that champion was, but how did she support you in that role?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Okay, it's going to be Allie Love Minute. Here we go. So I'd seen her name through IDLance and reached out to connect with her on LinkedIn. We ended up chatting for a while. And then maybe, I don't know, Allie, was it like 2 weeks later, a month later, she posted something on IDLance saying how do you go about getting a junior ID? I think I need some help. And I was like, hey, remember me? We talked for a long time. This would be perfect. And so the first things she gave me were very, very small, like creating text to speech, organizing files, creating little rise blocks, very small things. So baby steps. But the fact that she trusted me enough, I, worked really hard to be super communicative, lots of attention to detail, make sure she was happy with what I was doing. And it was this great kind of back and forth, that she was my mentor and I was her first subcontractor. So we kind of worked through that together, which was great. But just that constant support. She was always there when I had questions. She gave great feedback. I learned a ton from it. So there you go. Allie, love, minute over.
Y'all just wanted to
Not yet.
embarrass me here, make me
I
blush.
love
Oh
Allie.
my goodness.
Allie's amazing. I've worked with her as well. She's phenomenal.
True story. And I'm also always looking for opportunities to pay that forward to other transitioning teachers and other people just looking to get into the field too. So.
Yes. That's we love that. I think whenever I talk to anyone who's being mentored, I say the same thing. I say, how can you think about how valuable this is for you and what can you do for another person, whether it be in this field or something else. That's wonderful. And there's a question I'm going to ask you all later regarding, like, if you were to hire an ID, what would you look for? So we'll get more into that. But thank you for all of your lovely, kind words. I've worked with almost all of you on the call and all of you are fantastic. And okay. All right. Enough of that. Someone else go talk about your mentors.
I'll throw one in. My person who really like gave me the push and the confidence and like every time, I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. It was Kara North. And I know Kara North is sort of this like, I almost feel like Kara North is this like disembodied figure of energy now. Like, everyone follows Kara North to some degree. And this was during a time, I think, when Kara had more bandwidth. And so I feel like I was in the last wave of people who could sort of like be like, hey, can I chat with you about this thing? And I offered to like, I was like, I'll pay you for your time. Like I just needed like a coach. And she was very much like, no, just, when it comes time, you pay it forward. Like the next time, like if someone comes to you for mentorship, if someone needs your help, my price to you is for you to pay this forward. But she gave me a break too. Like she had me come in and, be part of a presentation for ATD's like, emerging instructional designers thing. And so I got to put together a presentation about that story I just told you a few minutes ago. And man, she really just like pushed me during the times when I needed it most. And, I think too, like there's this teacher mindset that's really hard to break out of that. Like once you're in for life, and that's transitioning out is just so hard because you just never can see beyond that. And she really kind of went, no, boy, go forward, do this thing and, give it a try. And, if worst comes to worst, go back to the classroom. But like, you got this, go, like do the thing. And it's so valuable. Like it's such I'm sure for her it was such an easy thing to push me, but for me it was something that is just invaluable.
Yeah. Kim or Starla, you want to share, give anyone a shout out or a program or a video
I'll
or
go.
anything?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it echoes what Alex said is like, I just was second guessing myself and I had imposter syndrome for so long and the job came up and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready, but I was in this weird place where I needed the work if I was going to leave teaching and like, but I just didn't feel ready. But I had like a pretty decent portfolio. My resume was good. I just hadn't submitted it because I wasn't confident. And Robin Sargent, who is the owner of Idle Courses, she is the one that was like, you got this. You can do it. You're ready. She's like, I've seen all your stuff. Just put it out there. And I got hired. And the job was through them, but I had to interview and do all of that on my own with the company. And so I got it on my own accord. And so I just needed that push. I needed someone who was in instructional design to say, you are ready. Do it.
Kim, I want to get to you in a sec, but I want to give a shout out because, so my role to ID was different. I stopped teaching. I was a full-time stay-at-home dad. As any of you who've been on call with me know that the little one likes to jump on the call too, even though she's at school now. But I want to give a shout out to Andy LePage. He's the lead ID that I've worked with at another agency. And he was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, yeah, I do. And I had some learning that I had to do to figure it out, kind of figure out who I want to be. he gave me that space to learn, but more importantly, he gave me that confidence, that imposter syndrome that you're talking about. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and that's okay to say that, but was able to like be able to talk about that, gave me that space to be creative. So like as I think about, you know, what I'm doing is I'm working with folks and trying to be that mentor, trying to pay it forward. I've got my Andy hat on, and I think about what Andy has done for me, and I still work with Andy quite a bit. He's someone I look up to, but he's a friend and a mentor, and you know, gave me that opportunity, allowed me to do different things in order to do that. So I wanted to give a shout out too. So yeah, with that, sorry Kim, I wanted to just give a shout out too. So go ahead.
No, that's totally fine. Like I said, I transitioned so long ago, I took the non-traditional route. So there were not those people that I could reach out to or that reached out to me. I did have some teacher friends that I like to shout out. That was Patrice Lee, Gwen Powell, and Brian Davis. They were all, two of them were teachers at the time, and we worked with that school district, helping plan conferences and delivering PD. And Patrice Lee, she was the social studies curriculum director. Because when our local city and county school districts merged, they opened all the central office positions. And they started texting me like, Kim, this position sounds like you. I really think you should apply for this. This really sounds like you. So they kind of put it out there. You know, it was one of my things to do to look at those positions, but I hadn't looked and I hadn't thought of it. And they kind of reached out and said, hey, this really sounds like you. I really think you should do it. So they were the first ones to encourage me and say, you should do that. Within actual instructional design, I don't think there's one person, but there's been many that have said, you know, I've shared some instructional design resources on my company website, and I've had people say, hey, this is really good. I've liked what you posted. I like how transparent you are. There's been a lot of people that have reached out and asked for like one-on-one coffee chats, and they've been appreciative and even shared that thanks. So in the ID world, not one person, but a lot of people being encouraging, or like a lot of people lately saying, hey, I've worked with a client on ID. I don't touch LMS administration, but Kim, I know you're going to take care of them. And they've handed them off to me, and I've appreciated that.
It's great that you mentioned that, Kim, because I've seen these interactions in the community where in the IDLance chats where people are like, hey, is there a list of something? And they're like, hey, have you seen Kim Scott's list of this thing? And so people cite you, girl. They cite you frequently enough to where we notice. So I think it's really cool that actually you are kind of playing a mentor role inadvertently through the content that you've put out for people. Or maybe advertently, I don't know. Is that even a word?
Hadn't thought about that.
So yeah, I think that's amazing. Awesome. Okay. So switching gears a little bit. The next question I have for you, so in my role at IDLance and also in my role through my business, I am always like interviewing people, or people are like, hey, Allie, like, how do you get an ID role? And what I like to tell people is I say, I want you to put the hiring manager hat on. I want you to put on that hat. I like wearing different hats. I should be wearing a hat right now. Of like, okay, what are you going to look for? If you have to give, like, think about a precious project that you have, right? And now imagine you need to subcontract out that project and you have to entrust someone with that project. What do you look for in their resume? What do you look for in their LinkedIn profile? What do you look for during an interview? And so now I want to have you all put that hat on. Imagine you're subcontracting something that you have, or maybe you are already subcontracting things out. But now with the lens of transitioning teachers, what are some skills or some things that you're looking for if you're going to bring on a newly transitioned teacher, that will show you that they are ready to take on some kind of introductory project?
I don't mind starting on this one. So for me, it's a lot of the same skills that I looked for when I was hiring teachers. So it's communication, number one, and that kind of goes along with attitude. Like, how do you take feedback? How do you take, maybe some constructive criticism, things like that. Do you learn from it? Are you willing to learn? Do you want to learn? And then also attention to detail, not letting those little things slip through and finding things maybe before I find them, which is always a good thing. So that's kind of my wish list.
Love it. Love it. There's a lot else I could say on that too, but I will wait for others to share, and then I'm sure I'll jump in and share more things at the end. Someone else, please go.
One that I really look for, because, I want to talk to them first. That's going to be a big one, is vulnerability. Honestly, I really like to know where people are self-aware of things that they might have in terms of shortcomings, or, like even just like, oh, hey, tell me about a time when you've done a similar project. It's like, well, I did a similar project X number of months ago, and this went really well, but this didn't go really well, but it was a learning experience. Like, I want those cards on the table. So that way, like, I know, like, and that's the thing, is like, even if I don't want one of those, my weaknesses are my strengths type of people. Like, I want, like, no, this is where I could shore up a bit. So that way I know when I get the thing from you that I want, it's like, all right, I got to look here first so I can shore this up. But like, I still want you to do the things that I want you to do. So vulnerability is a big one for me.
Yes.
I loved Catherine's answer about attention to detail. That's really big. So that you don't miss the little things or how things come together. I look for innovation and ability for growth. I have actually I've subcontracted before and will continue to do so. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I feel like I want to give people chances, like you said, that may not have any experience or may need to build their resume, so they may look for a corporate job in addition to freelancing. But I love to see how they start versus how they end. Are you growing? Are you innovating? Not just degrees, not just certifications, not just certificates from academies. I want to see you actual grow. And it doesn't always have to be on the e-learning. Is it your process? Is it the way you think about things? Are you willing to help the project grow? So when I say innovation, I tell them this may be my contract and you may be subcontracting, but I don't know everything. If you see something we can improve upon, tell me. If you're wondering why I do something a certain way, ask. Maybe that's just the way I've always done it. And you may say, hey, Kim, there's a way to cut this in half. I'm not that leader that's afraid to hear other perspectives and other sides. And also, one of the first things I tell them when I do my quote unquote onboarding is my goal is to set you up for success. So I'm trying to give you everything you need, not just resources or files, but I'm also trying to give you strategies, methods of thinking that help you to be successful in this project. And then whatever you learned here, go be successful in your job or your freelance business. So I definitely want them to innovate and I want them to grow. And actually afterwards, I have an option where we can talk about the project or how things went. And I ask them, did you learn anything? Did you grow? Is there something I can do to help you grow?
All right, everyone who's listening, y'all go work for Kim, all right? Because those are amazing things in someone that you want to work for. You want to work for someone who is there to help you grow, who actually truly wants to get feedback. Because also, like, as someone, I hire and I am hired by people, to actually work with someone who wants that feedback is like just amazing. So go work for Kim.
Allie,
And Kim, I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying too.
If I could throw in one thing, when I left teaching, I had to go and tell my principal. It was summertime. And I had to go to his office to tell him I was leaving. And he was like, oh man, I was going to be department chair. And I had ideas. And he had already had 2 other social studies teachers that had transferred to other schools. And he was like, I have all these plans. And you one of the teachers that actually these kids. And this was in a part of town that was, it had its challenges. It's a great historical part of town, but it had its challenges. And he was like, you enjoy being here. You really work with the kids. And when I told him I was leaving because I got this district level position, he said, stop, no more explanation needed. As a leader, I want my people to grow. This is an opportunity you can't miss out on. So forget everything I just said. And so I kind of carry that with me. So I don't care if I just hire you to make an e-learning template. I want you to grow. And I tell them, you know, I give them a list of quote unquote benefits. And one of them is, if you do good work, I'll call you back. But I'll also, you know, serve as a reference because you've done work for me. So you want to apply for a job? I can be a reference and I can speak to, well, you know, you did for me.
Yeah.
But I think what you're bringing up is something that's important. And the difference between being an ID, especially if you're a remote freelance ID and you're working from home, there's no longer the teacher's lounge. There's no longer the copy machine that you have to change. I mean, how many of us have got stuck sticking our arm in the copy machine because that paper is broken, this, that, and the other thing? Like, that's one of the things that I think you have to work on as a teacher is the idea of asking questions and like finding that community. We went into teaching because we talk about community. We care about more than ourselves. And one of the hardest things and one of the biggest things that I've learned is we got to find ways to connect with each other. Allie knows that I like to ask some questions. I like to kind of go through and kind of dig a little bit deeper. You know, Catherine knows I like to jump on a video call to talk about something and not get stuck on Slack, you know, whatever it may be. And I, you know, that's that one piece is like, we are naturally curious. We get into teaching because we like to talk, we like to chat with each other, but finding those opportunities to really kind of grow and connect there. So I just wanted to chime that in to encourage that because that's the hardest thing to do, especially when if we're remote or we're free time, you know, freelancing.
Can I add to that too? Actually, that's the biggest thing that I've missed about teaching is because I have been freelance for 3.5 years now, and I just feel like it's me in my little room all the time. And I am so grateful for the IDLance community because you guys are amazing, but you have to be really proactive about it. And I like what you said, Craig, jumping on a Zoom call or whatever. So it's more personal than just typing on a computer. I definitely would love to implement that more in my own life because I feel like I just get stuck and I'm like, I don't want to jump on camera right now. It's so, you know, but I do think every time I do it, I feel so much better after having like a face-to-face conversation with a colleague. So that's definitely one thing I miss because I am such an outgoing like personality. Like I miss that so much.
So that kind of leads into that next question because it's like, there's that high, right? Like, think about the first day of school. You don't really know who the kids are. Like, to me, like, so I know Allie's gonna be surprised with this, but I was like giving fist bumps to everybody and like, you know, I was getting all juiced. You know, my therapist talks about, you know, sometimes like, where do you get your yayas from? You know, like he gets it from compliments and stuff like that. Like, and I feel like when we move to instructional design, it's harder to get those yayas. Where do you, and that's the question I want to bring up. Is it the Zoom for you, Starla, where you're getting those yayas, where you're getting excited about what you're doing? Where do you get that excitement that maybe teaching gave to you? And I want to kick that to the whole community. You know, where are you guys kind of going with that to get that now?
I'll start. I think I get it in a variety of places, and I think you kind of have to. I think I get excited about things in the communities on LinkedIn. There's some really good like e-learning developers that I follow, and they post amazing stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's so great. I want to do that. Like, this is such a great idea. Or I'll bounce ideas off of them in the comment section. Or IDLance is huge. Like I feel like I ask a lot of questions always, and people are always there to like answer my questions and help out. So I have a few different things, you know, different places that I utilize.
Can I actually?
Oh, go ahead.
Catherine, go
Allie.
ahead. No.
Okay. To kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Starla, is one of the things that I miss about teaching is, especially with my little guys, my little 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, was that aha moment when you could see the light bulb click and it turned on. What's so cool though about my journey through ID is I have a lot of my own aha moments. And I get to see that throughout the IDLance community too, when just like you said, Starla, you ask a question and somebody else chimes in and helps. It's that community aha, we're all figuring it out together. And if I can add one more thing really quick, sorry to go off on another tangent. We were talking about interviewing transitioning teachers. And I know one question that I always was worried about was, why do you want to transition into ID? Because I wanted to make sure not to be negative. And that's one small piece of advice too, is it's not because you want to leave the classroom. Is find out, why do you want to be an ID? What drives you towards ID instead of away from the classroom? So just kind of that switching that mindset. Thanks, Allie.
Yeah, of course. No, I love that. That's really solid. And that's just good interview advice in general. Always leave it toward a positive, lead it toward what you want in the future. It's not where you've been, it's where you're going. Yeah, love it. So to answer Craig's question of like where do you get that sense of being in the classroom and not being in the classroom, I do online tutoring through a platform called Wyzant. So I don't think I said this earlier, but I was a high school chemistry teacher, and I also taught chemistry in the higher ed space too. I still occasionally teach at CC. A couple years ago, I had a full book schedule as an ID, but I taught at night, and that was so fun. So like if you have a master's in your field, you can teach at a CC, and that's amazing. But you can tutor through online platforms, and I've worked with students like over the course of several years because like I'll have them in Chem 1 and then Chem 2, or like last semester, I taught pre-calculus. Oh, I don't think I've ever worked so hard for my money trying to pull some pre-calculus. ChatGPT helped me out with that. But like you can do online tutoring and still get a student experience. And I just love that. It's so fun to see the aha moments. Made a really big breakthrough with one of my students just this spring, and it was awesome. And that's the stuff that I miss from the classroom.
I'm like Starla. I'm an extrovert. I like people and that kind of thing. So one thing that I love is to network. I am in so many groups. So I am in IDLance, and there's several other Slack groups. Facebook professional groups are really good for networking, really active. LinkedIn ones aren't as active, but I, join and participate in those. I love when people have like community, just general chat days, or even if there's a chat day where we can, talk about different things. I love to participate in those so much. I started my own, Facebook group for LMS admins because there was a gap, and, people had questions about it, different LMSs. So I started that. I love doing that. So that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is like you said, Allie, just helping others, because I have a bad habit of thinking what I know, everybody knows. By the time I know it, oh, that's old news. Everybody knows it. Until people have told me, no, Kim, no one knows this. Like I had that list of places to find contract and freelance work. And people would see it and be like, Kim, will you send me this? Wow, you could just Google and find it. And they were like, no, send me the list. And I started thinking, this might be something other people want to see. Or, I learned about this tool and I'm like, but everybody could find out about it. And they were like, no, but Kim, sometimes it's not the tool, it's your perspective or the way you explain it or the examples you give. So I guess that's the other thing. Sometimes it's just filling the gaps, helping people out. So that's why I've started saying, hey, let me start a blog or make some videos and share stuff. Even if I think everybody else knows, there's always someone that it can help. So getting out and talking to others is one, but also sharing knowledge and helping others is, I guess, my other, what did you say, Craig? Yeah moment.
Dude, like that whole not assuming what other people know thing was like a huge like glass shatter moment for my brain when that happened. I think it happened first in my marriage. It was assuming things like my wife knew. I'm a super technology, super technical. My wife is not. And so like I would say things, she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And so then I would sometimes go back the opposite way and she's like, I know how to turn the computer on. And so it's finding that balance, but like that first bit of like, oh, everyone can do this. No, not everyone can do this, which is why, I think, coming from teacher world, and especially me with my littles, my seventh grade, my seventh grade kids, you spend so much time doing that other extreme of like, all right, this is how you turn the computer on. This is how you get to Google. This is how search terms work in Google. So that way I'm making you a better Googler, not just a better, whatever I'm trying to teach you at the time. And then you interact with adults. And, in teacher world, there's definitely, I don't know, in my districts, there was a lot of peacocking of like, oh, I can do blah, blah, blah. So you sort of assume that people start knowing things that they don't really know and that they're just sort of talking out of their ID lances about, and so like and so then you just kind of have to find that middle that middle bit, and like what to share, how to share, always share, and doing so with tact too, like doing so never looking down your nose, never talking down at anybody. It's a surprising amount of growth in just that thing that Kim's talking about. It's like she said that, I was like, ah, yes, that thing. So
And that's a really good reminder. That's something I struggle with as well. Because when I talk to people, they're like, hey, like that's cool ideas, but how do you find time to share those ideas when you are actively working on a boatload of projects and like you're working on all these things and trying to manage your life and eating healthy and, taking your dog for walks? How do you find time for that? And so listening to all of you share that is really inspiring. Um, I think now with 7 minutes left, I would just love to just open the floor. What other advice do you have for teachers that are interested in instructional design? How can they transition? What are some more thoughts you want to share? Share your insights with them now.
I would say be prepared to put in the work. That yes, there's a lot of skills that transfer, but there's still a whole lot to learn. So be prepared to put in the work, be good with putting in the work. And, if you really are a teacher in the true sense of the word, you love to learn. So it should be right up your alley. And that's another way that it's a good fit too.
Yeah, and on top of that, like you had mentioned, Catherine, how when you planned your transition, you did so over the course of a year. You worked nights, you worked weekends, you are working after hours. You might be taking gigs that are lower paying than what you would ideally take once you're fully transitioned. See this time in your transition as like you're investing in yourself and in your knowledge and education. Take those volunteer gigs. Take really any opportunity that comes your way. And something I say to all freelancers is treat really every interaction that you have with your client as a job interview in and of itself. And kind of what I mean by that is every interaction, every Slack message, every conversation, every deliverable, that is an opportunity for them to choose you the next time. Because as Kim said, as I'm sure we've all really said, like, it's really about forming those relationships and getting those gigs again and getting the recommendations that you need. Communication is incredibly important. And the vulnerability, I agree with what Alex had said earlier about that. And just your attitude, your demeanor, like even over Slack, there's a terminology for that, which actually I was writing a course. There's a terminology for how you communicate your attitude over Slack or over instant message. I forget what it's called, but like how you portray yourself is so important. Okay, what else?
So I may jump in more than once if I get ideas, because I feel like there's a lot floating in my head and I just
So
got
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'm a big advocate of, you'll hear me say a lot, L&D instead of just ID, because in the way I think about it is learning and development is the whole umbrella and ID falls under that. But there are other things. So for instance, Alex and I got here because we went ed tech first. And I've told a lot of people about educational technology because, and not everybody feels this way, but sometimes in corporate ID jobs, they'll say, well, they don't want a teacher, or they don't necessarily value teaching experience as much as they really should. But in ed tech, they want somebody that you're training teachers. So if you've been a teacher, oh, you know how they think. Oh, you already know the state standards. Oh, you understand the classroom management issues. Your teaching experience is seen like gold, So I tell people you don't have to make this big jump to something that maybe different. Look at things like ed tech. Look at technical writing. If you were an English teacher and you're good at breaking down directions, why not technical writing? Why not, if you were a media specialist, you could not be a voiceover artist. You could be, you could develop videos. There's just so much in L&D. Don't get me wrong, instructional design is great, but there are other, I'll say ID cousins that can get you in there. One of the reasons I was hired, it was a Fortune 50 company, and they hired me is because they said, oh, it wasn't that I went straight from teaching. Oh, you stood up and taught college professors and teachers. Those are adults. Oh, you've had to create your own training material. Oh, you've had to deal with the politics of the biggest district in Tennessee and an unorganized healthcare system college. You can handle this Fortune 50 company. There's those other things. So consider other paths that can kind of be ID adjacent, or even if you want to do ID, you could be a technical writer that has ID responsibilities. And then you get that experience there. And maybe if you want to be an e-learning developer, develop e-learning within your role. Or you can become an instructor-led trainer, but learn to create your own training. So if you want to get into e-learning, so consider other or adjacent routes to get you there. Also, and I've seen more of this lately, and I guess that's because my thing lately is sharing jobs and freelance jobs, because I feel like this economy is just not what it should be, and hiring or finding jobs is hard. So I'm, sharing it. But consider freelance teaching jobs. I've seen people literally posting, I need somebody to develop curriculum, really looking for someone who has elementary math experience. That's a freelance project, because even though it may not be ID and it's more teacher, it's giving you freelance experience. One of the things I gave myself the first year I started freelancing was grace. I said, Kim, just give yourself the first year to figure it out. Figure out how to talk to clients. You don't have it all figured out, but allow yourself to figure things out. So freelance as a curriculum developer, writing. I've seen people on Upwork or other platforms say, I need somebody to write lesson plans. Start there. Start with those things and figure it out. And you can gradually figure out what it is you want to do. And I guess the last thing for now, because I know my time is about up, is really do a skills assessment. This is piggybacking off of what Catherine said. Make sure it is what you want to do, because I've seen too many people with ID and even IT say, oh, I want to go there because it's money. Or I want to get into that because I heard ID got a lot of remote work. But you can end up being there and being unhappy. So look at your skills, look at what you want to do, and look at the cross between that, and make sure it's somewhere where you'll be happy and they'll be happy with you.
Dude, I gotta keep building on this mound that's already incredible. All of those are just like chef's kiss level everything. Just to frame this a little bit, I've recently been officially diagnosed with adult ADHD, which explains a lot of what I'm going to say next. Building upon what Kim is talking about, and I'm sure Kim might fall into this category, not saying that you're diagnosable, but, maybe, you have to be like addicted to learning. Like, you have to be addicted to learning. You have to be addicted to growing. And that could be learning facets of ID. That could be addicted to growing your business. It could be addicted to learning about business. But like, especially now, and hearkening back to another point that Kim made, where it's like, 10 years ago, this wasn't everywhere. And now, going back to what Starla said, it's like, oh, it is everywhere. Like, there's just stuff about ID and about e-learning just sort of exploding in your face all the time. You have to be tenacious. Like, you have to put in the nights, you have to put in the weekends, you have to want to grow. But I think my biggest contribution that's different than a lot of these points that have already been touched on is one thing you really have to be good at is you have to be really good at self-assessing where you are now and where you need to be. And, go look at other people who are awesome. Like, go look at other people who are like incredible. It's like, God, that is brilliant. But really, like, break down, why are they awesome? Like, why is this project that's similar to my project really good? And why does my project kind of suck? Because, and you have to be honest with yourself. You have to kill those darlings of like, yeah, my project kind of sucks right now, or my portfolio is just not as like snappy, or it doesn't feel as well rounded as this other person's portfolio. Is it an organizational thing? If it's like a storyline thing, it's like, oh, they have this set up in this way with these kind of triggers to make this thing happen. Or if it's a graphic design thing, like, why does their design look so much better or marginally better than my design? And I say marginally, I want to throw that in there because a lot of the time, it's not a rejection per se, it's a selection. Every job gets zillions of applicants now, and they can only pick one person. Does that mean you're not qualified for the job? No, it doesn't mean you're not qualified for the job. It just means that they get to pick the one person who is the rightest, the correctest fit for that position. And it could have been you. Very well could be you. Like if that person gets canned or, gets launched into outer space or something, they might call you, but that don't bank on that happening. But just be aware that that you have to be tenacious, you have to self-assess, and you have to realize that sometimes it's just an increment of single digit percentages. So you got to do everything you can to plug whatever leaks might be in your boat.
Such
I love that.
sage advice. Yeah.
I
So
love
good,
that it's not
Alex.
rejection, it's selection. And what I love too is I think it goes back to the earlier point. If you see somebody doing something really cool or they have a portfolio, reach out to them and ask. Like that's the biggest part. Let's learn from each other. We're all teachers. We're teachers. We want to learn from each other. If we're not stagnant for a reason, we literally are rebranding ourselves and rebranding our careers. So it's the continuous learner. It probably works that the ADHD is strong with this one as well, Alex. So it helps me to figure out my wife sometimes will ask me that. She's like, how do you do all these different things? It's well, I sort of go where my feet are. Okay, I know I'm doing this project here, so my feet are here, and I can do these different things because I can compartmentalize in such a way. But yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I kind of want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you because you are what make IDLance great. You're part of this community. You came, you gave an hour of your time, and you shared some of that. So I highly encourage, those of you that were in the chat, reach out, engage on LinkedIn, connect with us. None of us are hiding on there. We're all there for a reason. And I know all of our doors and our Zooms are open. And if we're close enough, so is the coffee shop. Well, that's an iced tea. There we go. There we go. Thanks for the green screen. But before I start rocking, Alice Cooper School is out for summer. So I think Starla said, or Catherine said she wanted to sing it for us, but no, not really. But I wanted, on behalf of IDLance, on behalf of Allie, I wanted to thank all of you for sharing all of your wisdom. I look forward to continuing to connect with you, learn with you, and work with you. So I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you. This was great.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone.